This is the brief on Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. Okay, so ever wonder how we actually build the future? Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, it's not just another business book. It's more like a guide that really makes you rethink innovation and, well, how you create something totally new. Let's dive into his main thoughts. First up, Thiel talks about two basic ways things move forward. You've got horizontal progress, or 1 to N. Think copying stuff that works, like making 100 typewriters if you already have one. Then there's vertical, the 0 to 1 leap. That's creating something brand new, like inventing the first word processor ever. Thiel says this 0 to 1 stuff, real tech innovation, that's what truly makes a better future, not just spreading old ideas around. So his second point, how do you win if you're building something completely new? Well, he has this kind of counterintuitive idea. Creative monopolies. Thiel says all happy companies are different, right? And it's because they manage this. Unlike businesses just fighting each other with no profit, think airlines. Companies like Google really succeed because they offer something so unique, there's just no real substitute. And these aren't bad things. They're actually engines for progress, using profits to invest long-term and innovate for everyone. Finally, how do you do this? How do you make these 0 to 1 leaps? It comes down to what he calls definite optimism, which he talks about in the chapter You Are Not a Lottery Ticket. Thiel really pushes back on the idea that success is just random luck. Nope. He says it's about conscious design. We shouldn't just hope for a better future. We need to actually plan and work to create a specific one. It's kind of like intelligent design for startups. And it's absolutely key. Embrace bold thinking and strategic planning to build a unique future, moving from 0 to 1.
Welcome to The Critique. Today we're diving into excerpts from Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, specifically looking at how its core ideas might be amplified even further.
Yeah, it's such a foundational text for so many in the startup world and, incredibly influential. But there's always room to refine, right?
Exactly. So let's jump right in. Our first point. While the material makes a strong contrarian case for monopoly driving progress, its initial pitch, let's say, could maybe anticipate reader skepticism a bit more and clarify its unique definition sooner.
That's a really key observation. I think the weakness lies in, well, the word monopoly itself. It just carries so much negative baggage for most people.
Right. Chapter 3, All Happy Companies Are Different, hits you with capitalism and competition are opposites, and monopoly is the condition of every successful business. It's designed to be provocative, no doubt.
Absolutely. But for a general audience, that word monopoly, it immediately puts people on the defensive, doesn't it? Before they even fully grasp the crucial idea of a creative monopoly that Thiel's actually championing.
Yeah, it creates this unnecessary hurdle right at the start. People are wrestling with the negative connotation instead of absorbing the core message about unique value creation.
So the suggestion is really about managing that initial reaction better, maybe integrate a clearer, more explicit definition of creative monopoly much earlier, and maybe even proactively acknowledge the standard negative view right away.
Disarm the skepticism from the outset.
Exactly. So the reader is primed to understand Thiel's specific positive meaning rather than, fighting their own assumptions about the word.
That makes sense. So concretely, how might that look? Maybe even in the preface?
Yeah, potentially. Like when introducing the whole 0 to 1 concept, you could add a brief sentence. Something like, this act of creation often results in what we call a creative monopoly. And just to be clear, we're not talking about a static, rent-seeking cartel, but a business so uniquely valuable it temporarily stands alone, actually driving more innovation.
Setting the stage immediately. Okay, I like that. And then in chapter 3 itself?
Well, instead of leading with the stark capitalism and competition are opposites line, maybe start with a short paragraph that draws the contrast explicitly.
Like?
Something along the lines of, forget the textbook image of a monopoly as some greedy, stagnant giant. What we're talking about here is actually a dynamic state. It's achieved by building something so new, so much better, that it effectively escapes direct competition for a time, and that fosters breakthroughs for society. Actively invite the reader into this different way of seeing it.
preempting the negative reaction by defining the positive case first.
Precisely. And then maybe just sprinkle reminders throughout, like when discussing the airline industry versus Google.
Ah, right, where the competition destroys profits.
Yeah, after explaining that, maybe add a quick parenthetical like, this really shows the destructive side of intense competition, not some inherent flaw in a truly innovative, creative monopoly, which actually adds value.
So consistently reinforcing this specific definition of monopoly, keep guiding the reader.
Exactly. It builds a more robust understanding and just avoids potential misinterpretation of a really central idea.
Okay, good. That feels actionable. Let's shift gears a bit. The second point we identified relates to the power law.
Ah, yes, the power law. Introduced very powerfully for venture capital, but maybe its implications for individual careers could be woven in more consistently throughout the whole narrative.
Right. Chapter 7, Follow the Money, explains the VC angle brilliantly. And it does say everybody is an investor in their own career. That connection is made.
It is, but then the discussion on what to do with the power law seems to focus mostly on just picking one valuable thing, which is crucial, of course.
But it doesn't explicitly loop back to earlier ideas, like finding secrets, or having definite plans, or even building strong foundations as part of that individual power law strategy.
Exactly. That line, "You cannot diversify his own life," is so potent. But the practical application for the reader, how it connects to everything else, it feels like it could be integrated much more deeply. It's introduced, but maybe not fully leveraged as a personal strategy principle.
I see that. It's such a fundamental concept. Applying it more explicitly to personal choices could really elevate the message.
Definitely. So the suggestion is basically to reinforce the power law's relevance for individual decisions more consistently. Whenever topics like personal agency, finding those unique secrets, or committing to a mission come up.
Making it less of a VC observation and more of a core principle for anyone trying to build something significant, including their own career.
Yeah, transforming it into a fundamental guide for ambitious individuals. How do we make that concrete for the reader, though? How does it show up in the text?
Good question. Maybe back in Chapter 6, You Are Not a Lottery Ticket, when contrasting definite and indefinite attitudes.
Okay.
When the text talks about the definite person striving to be a monopoly of one, right after that, maybe add something like, and this singular focus isn't just ambition, right? It's actually an acknowledgement of the power law reality that disproportionate rewards tend to flow to those who master something truly unique and valuable. You have to make concentrated bets because you can't diversify your one life.
Ah, nice. Directly linking monopoly of one to power law thinking, making personal strategy feel like a high-stakes investment.
Exactly. And then what about Chapter 8, Secrets? Finding secrets of nature or secrets about people.
How would the power law connect there?
Well, you could frame the search for those secrets as the individual's power law investment. It's not just learning interesting stuff. It's about finding that one insight, that one hidden truth that could yield exponential personal or professional returns, like finding the alpha in your own intellectual capital.
I like that framing. The pursuit of secrets is a power law strategy. It makes it very active. And what about relationships, like co-founders?
Good point. Chapter 9, Founding Matrimony. The example of Luke Nozick's first failed partnership?
Yeah, the text frames it as detrimental, obviously.
But could it be framed more explicitly through the power law? Like, explain how choosing the wrong partner doesn't just cause conflict, it actively reduces the potential for those outlier exponential returns that the power law describes, both for the venture and for the individual founders.
So choosing the right co-founder is essentially making a high-conviction bet on achieving a power law outcome together.
Precisely. It highlights the immense leverage and risk in those singular, non-diversifiable choices we make. It threads the power law concept through these really critical personal and professional decisions.
Okay, that really strengthens the connection, making the power law a much more pervasive theme for the individual reader.
Right. Now, our third area of focus kind of zooms out a bit. It's about the scope of 0 to 1 itself.
Meaning?
Well, the material is obviously laser-focused on startups and tech. which makes sense. But the core message, that 0 to 1 leap, could potentially be shown to apply much more broadly across all sorts of human endeavors, making it feel more universal.
I definitely see that. Chapter 1 does define technology broadly, any new and better way of doing things. That's a great inclusive definition.
But
But yeah, the examples. They overwhelmingly circle back to IT, Silicon Valley, PayPal, Facebook, Google, Tesla. That focus, while super relevant for tech entrepreneurs, might unintentionally signal to other readers, this isn't really about my field.
it sort of creates an implicit boundary. Thiel even says the future shouldn't only happen in Silicon Valley, but the examples don't fully bear that out. It feels like a missed opportunity to illustrate that very point with non-tech cases.
Yeah, it's like the principle is universal, but the illustrations are quite specific. So the suggestion is pretty straightforward then.
Basically, yeah. Intersperse more diverse non-tech examples of 0 to 1 creation. Show creative monopoly thinking in other fields. Explicitly demonstrate how universal these principles actually are.
Widening the aperture so someone in, say, education or the arts or healthcare can see themselves in the 0 to 1 framework just as clearly as a software engineer.
Exactly. How might that look? Maybe back in Chapter 1 again, the challenge of the future?
Where it contrasts horizontal, 1 to n, and vertical, 0 to 1, progress. Using the typewriter to word processor example.
Yeah, right there. Supplement it. Add analogies. Like, look, if you take one great recipe and just make 100 plates of it, that's horizontal progress, 1 to n. But if you invent an entirely new cuisine that changes how people think about food, that's vertical. That's 0 to 1.
Or maybe something like building more standard hospitals is 1 to n, but inventing a cure for a disease that was previously untreatable, or creating a totally new model for preventative care, that's 0 to 1.
Perfect. It makes the concept instantly relatable outside the tech bubble. And what about later, like in the secrets chapter?
Chapter 8, yeah. Asking, what secrets is nature not telling you? What secrets are people not telling you?
Instead of just tech or scientific secrets, could we broaden the examples there too? Maybe point to secrets in art, like a radical new aesthetic movement that completely changed painting or music.
Or social organization, like maybe Maria Montessori discovering new ways kids could learn. A revolutionary educational approach that was definitely a 0 to 1 insight about people, about children.
Or even philosophy, a groundbreaking ethical theory that shifted how societies thought about justice. These were all 0 to 1 shifts, creating in a sense creative monopolies of thought or practice.
Recognizing that searching for and finding these deep secrets happens across all domains of human progress, not just science labs or garages.
Right. And one more place, Chapter 13, Seeing Green, where it critiques the clean tech bubble and the myth of social entrepreneurship.
Okay, how could that be broadened?
Well, while making the valid critique, it could also emphasize that genuine 0 to 1 social innovations absolutely do embody the book's principles, even if they aren't tech companies per se.
So like a nonprofit that develops a truly novel, scalable intervention for homelessness, or a public health initiative that finds a fundamentally new way to deliver care that radically improves outcomes.
Exactly. Those would be perfect examples of 0 to 1 thinking applied successfully outside of traditional for-profit tech. It reinforces that the principles are about the nature and impact of the innovation, not the specific sector it happens in.
That feels like a really valuable expansion. It empowers a much wider audience to apply these powerful ideas.
So, to recap today's critique of 0 to 1, we looked at a few ways to potentially amplify its already significant impact.
Yeah, first, refining that initial presentation of monopoly. Maybe defining creative monopoly more explicitly up front to sidestep the negative baggage and draw readers in more smoothly.
Second, really weaving the power law concept through the entire narrative as it applies to individual choices, connecting it explicitly to finding secrets, choosing partners, and building a monopoly of one career.
And third, broadening the scope of examples beyond tech and Silicon Valley. Showing how that 0 to 1 thinking applies universally, whether it's in science, art, social change, or anywhere else humans are creating truly new value.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we're diving into a really provocative idea from Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, Notes on Startups or How to Build the Future. It's Well, it's a book that fundamentally challenges how many of us think about business and progress. The central question we'll explore is this: is competition inherently a destructive force for businesses and innovation, or is it actually a necessary and maybe beneficial driver of progress? My perspective is that competition, probably more often than not, fundamentally hinders long-term value creation and, truly novel innovation.
And my argument is going to be that while competition certainly presents significant challenges, no doubt about that, it's also an essential mechanism for progress, for efficiency, and for that constant drive for improvement that ultimately benefits society. It's a dynamic tension, And I think we sometimes misunderstand its role, or perhaps oversimplify Thiel's critique.
Okay, so to begin, the material posits a truth that, well, it might surprise many. Capitalism is premised on the accumulation of capital, but under perfect competition, all profits get competed away. This isn't just some abstract economic theory. We see it play out in stark, real-world examples. Consider the U.S. airline industry, right? In 2012, despite serving millions of passengers and, facilitating enormous value in terms of travel and commerce, these airlines collectively made a paltry 37 cents per passenger trip. It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? Contrast that with Google. The book argues that Google, in the same year, while creating perhaps less overall physical value in terms of direct human movement, captured a remarkable 21% of its $50 billion revenue. This made Google worth 3 times all U.S. airlines combined.
This isn't some kind of fluke. This disparity powerfully illustrates how fiercely competitive, commoditized markets erode profit, the very fuel for capital accumulation and future investment. Thiel defines what he calls a monopoly, not as some predatory entity, but as a company that's so good at what it does that no other firm can offer a close substitute. Google in search is his prime example, of course. What he's really saying, I think, is that intense competition, far from being beneficial, forces companies into this ruthless focus on short-term margins and just, survival. Think about small restaurants, maybe driven to pay minimum wage, or even highly skilled chefs pushed to despair over the relentless pursuit of Michelin stars. These are battles for survival. A company with what Thiel calls a creative monopoly, by contrast, can actually afford to think about things beyond just making money. This freedom allows for long-term planning, foundational research, and even ethical considerations, like Google's original "Don't Be Evil" motto, which reflects the kind of broader vision a company can afford precisely because it isn't fighting for its very existence in a, cutthroat market. The material even goes so far as to claim that competition is less an economic ideal and more an ideology that pervades our society and distorts our thinking, often leading to less overall gain for everyone involved. It's a powerful, almost contrarian perspective.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate the allure of those monopoly profits and the undeniable challenges inherent in fiercely competitive markets for individual businesses, as Thiel so vividly portrays. However, I fundamentally challenge the notion that competition is inherently destructive. In fact, I'd argue it's often the crucible, from which true innovation emerges. The material itself provides clues to this. Monopolists, as Thiel points out, frequently lie to protect themselves, either by exaggerating the competition they face or by broadly framing their market to appear less dominant.
Right.
We see this with Google's former chairman, Eric Schmidt, describing their market not just as search, but as this union of several large markets like mobile phones, wearable computers, self-driving cars, all sorts of things. This behavior, this very need to appear less dominant, actually highlights a societal expectation and, I think, a perceived value placed on competition, even by dominant players. Society, it seems, instinctively distrusts pure, unchallenged monopolies. Furthermore, the pursuit of what Thiel terms a creative monopoly, achieved not through coercion, but by inventing new and better things that genuinely create new categories of abundance for society, making existing solutions obsolete. This often arises directly from a competitive environment. Companies have to strive to be 10x better than existing solutions just to differentiate themselves and gain market share in the first place, or maybe even just to survive. The text also notes the dynamism of new monopolies, which consistently replaces old monopolies. Think of the shift from IBM to Microsoft, and then, Microsoft to Apple's iOS. This continuous cycle of new innovations displacing incumbents is itself a profound form of market dynamism, implicitly driven by the competitive drive to be superior and achieve that temporary creative monopoly. It's not a static picture, it's an evolving landscape where competitive pressure, in a broad sense, is always lurking, isn't it?
That's a powerful counterpoint, emphasizing the dynamism that can arise even from competitive pressures. But let's dig a bit deeper into what kind of progress we're actually talking about here, because the book makes a very clear distinction. The material argues that competition tends to foster what it calls one-to-N progress. This is horizontal progress or mere globalization, essentially copying things that already work and scaling them, like making 100 typewriters from one original design. To Thiel, this is not true innovation. True innovation, or 0-to-1, vertical progress, means creating something entirely new. It's doing new things, like creating a word processor from the concept of a typewriter. The lessons learned from the dot-com crash, according to Thiel, unfortunately encouraged this kind of incrementalism, pushing companies towards safer, one-to-N scaling. But the material vehemently advocates for the opposite, better to risk boldness than triviality, and that a bad plan is better than no plan. This highlights the crucial need for unique, non-competitive ventures that push beyond existing frameworks. Competition, by its very nature, tends to encourage incremental improvements to existing solutions, a race to the bottom in many ways, rather than the radical new creations that define true 0-to-1 progress. It's a fundamental difference in how we create value, I think.
Okay. Well, I understand a distinction Thiel draws between 0-to-1 and 1-to-N progress. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that competition inherently hinders the 0-to-1 leap. My challenge to that is this. The drive to achieve that 0-to-1 breakthrough, to create truly new, paradigm-shifting technology, is very often a direct response to, or maybe a desperate desire to escape intense competition. The material itself states that proprietary technology must be at least 10 times better than its closest substitute to lead to real monopolistic advantage. Why aim for 10 times better? Because that's what it takes to break away from the competitive noise, to make the competition irrelevant. Consider the examples given. PayPal made buying and selling on eBay 10 times better than mailing a check. That wasn't incremental, was it? Amazon offered 10 times as many books as any physical store, fundamentally changing retail. Apple's iPad, while not the first tablet, it improved on previous iterations by an order of magnitude in terms of user experience and integration. These aren't just incremental adjustments, are they? These are definitive 0-to-1 advancements that, while leading to temporary monopolies, arose from a profound competitive pressure to provide significantly superior solutions. It's the yearning to be the best, to capture that market, that often sparks the invention of something entirely new and better. In that sense, competition can be the engine, not the brake.
That's a compelling argument about the internal dynamics of competitive companies and the drive to be 10x better. But when you talk about competitive pressure driving 0-to-1, are we really talking about the kind of red ocean competition Thiel critiques? Or maybe a more subtle pressure to simply be exceptional? Doesn't the book argue that intense, direct competition often distracts from true exceptionalism, which brings us to how markets are defined and their broader societal impact? Thiel argues that competing in narrowly defined markets leads to what he calls competitive lies, like that hypothetical British restaurant in Palo Alto claiming to have no competition, and an obsessive focus on trivial differentiating factors. This, he argues, typically results in business failure because you're just fighting for scraps, The material is quite clear. Only a company with a strong market position, what Thiel calls a creative monopoly, can genuinely afford to think about things other than making money. It asserts that these creative monopolies aren't just good for the rest of society, they're powerful engines for making it better, by adding entirely new categories of abundance to the world rather than simply fighting over existing ones. This capacity for long-term thinking, for investing in truly novel creation and even, say, philanthropy, these are luxuries that cutthroat competition simply does not permit. You're too busy trying to survive day to day. So the question is,
Does competition really foster broader societal good, or just a race to the bottom that maybe benefits few in the long run?
I agree that narrowly defined markets and these competitive lies can be problematic, leading to inefficiencies and, frankly, wasted effort. But I do question whether the ruthlessness often seen in competitive markets is always a negative force for society as a whole. While it can be tough on individual businesses, absolutely, it can also lead to incredibly efficient pricing, continuous improvement in service, and a constant push for innovation that ultimately benefits the average consumer. We're talking about real value for the general public here. The very statement that profits come out of customers' wallets from monopolists implies a potential cost to society if there's no competitive check, right? Furthermore, the material itself states that the history of progress is a history of better monopoly businesses replacing incumbents. This continuous dynamic cycle suggests that even monopolies cannot rest on their laurels indefinitely. There's an implicit, ongoing competitive pressure to innovate or be displaced. IBM was dominant, then Microsoft, then Apple, Google, Amazon. Each had a period of dominance, a creative monopoly perhaps, but it was continuously challenged. The new categories of abundance that creative monopolies bring often only come about because firms are competing fiercely to be the one creating them, to be that next industry leader. The promise of that dominant position, even if temporary, is the carrot, and maybe the fear of being left behind by a competitor is the stick.
Those are indeed significant considerations for market structure and consumer benefit. But beyond the purely economic arguments, the material also explores the more subtle, perhaps more insidious, psychological impact competition has on companies and even individual entrepreneurs. What are your thoughts on competition as an ideology that can, warp thinking and behavior? Thiel describes this Shakespearean model where combatants become so utterly obsessed with each other, focusing only on their rivals' moves, that they essentially become mirror images, losing sight of any original purpose or larger goals. We saw this historically perhaps with Microsoft and Google. For a time, they seemed to be just copying each other's products, Windows versus Chrome OS, Bing versus Google Search, instead of truly pushing their own unique visions forward. Or think of the war over mobile credit card reader shapes. Square, NetSecure, Intuit, PayPal, all battling over kind of trivial design elements. This rivalry causes us to overemphasize old opportunities and slavishly copy what has worked in the past, leading to wasteful battles, much like the infamous Pets.com, where, $300 million in investment capital just disappeared in a battle over an online pet store market that, in hindsight, wasn't really worth fighting for in such a crowded space. It's almost as if competition itself becomes the goal, rather than, true value creation.
Yeah. I definitely acknowledge the pitfalls of what you're describing as imitative competition and that kind of destructive rivalry. Thiel's Shakespearean model is a compelling analogy for how companies can indeed lose their way by simply reacting to competitors. However, and this is crucial, I think, this very competitive pressure can also force highly constructive outcomes. While that sameness can certainly lead to wasteful rivalry, and I agree with Thiel there, isn't it also true that the existential threat of intense competition can sometimes force otherwise separate entities to consolidate and become stronger? Like that crucial merger between PayPal and X.com?
Okay.
Their offices were just 4 blocks apart. Their products mirrored each other feature for feature, locked in this absolutely brutal rivalry. But crucially, the founders became more scared about the rapidly inflating tech bubble, the broader competitive landscape, the external threat, than they were of one another. This external pressure, this competitive environment led to a negotiated 50-50 merger. This consolidation, born from a desperate competitive landscape, ultimately created a stronger, unified company capable of surviving the dot-com crash and building a truly successful business. So this demonstrates that competition, even when it looks destructive in its initial phases, can lead to necessary strategic decisions and a more focused human contribution in addressing hard problems that drive long-term survival and growth, not just wasteful battles. It pushes companies to make tough, sometimes vital choices.
Well, this has been a truly illuminating discussion. I'd summarize my position by saying that to truly innovate and build those 0 to 1 companies that create lasting value, Entrepreneurs must actively seek to escape the direct competitive fray and instead build defensible monopolies by offering something genuinely new and superior. The constant struggle of pure competition, as we've discussed, it just dissipates energy, resources, and vision, preventing the bold, long-term planning necessary for real transformational progress. As the material makes clear through its power law observation, the idea that a small number of companies generate the vast majority of economic returns, few companies create disproportionate value, and those are almost always the ones that manage to escape the competitive melee by doing something truly unique. It really calls for a fundamental shift in how we approach business formation.
And I would conclude by reiterating that while the ultimate goal may indeed be to achieve a strong, even monopolistic market position, the forces of competition, broadly defined, are, I think, indispensable for driving the innovation, the efficiency, and the relentless pursuit of 10x better solutions that ultimately lead to those valuable category-creating businesses, Thiel champions. It's a dynamic tension where the desire to overcome competition, or maybe to be so good that competition becomes irrelevant, fuels the very progress that Thiel advocates for. Without that underlying pressure to excel, to truly differentiate, well, we might not see these breakthroughs at all.
We've certainly heard compelling arguments on both sides today, grappling with whether competition is fundamentally destructive or a beneficial force for progress. The source material definitely challenges us to critically reevaluate our preconceived notions about the business landscape and the paths to innovation. It leaves us with a much richer understanding, I think, of the complex interplay between competition and progress. This isn't a simple equation, and it certainly gives us much more to explore within this fascinating material.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into ideas that can genuinely reshape how we see the world. Think about it. Every truly significant moment in business happens only once. The next Bill Gates won't build an operating system. The next Mark Zuckerberg won't create a social network. Copying existing models might feel safer, maybe easier, but revolutionary progress, the kind that truly moves us forward, comes from creating something entirely new. We're embarking on a deep dive into that radical act of creation, into what it means to go from 0 to 1, drawing insights from Peter Thiel's seminal book, 0 to 1, Notes on Startups, or How to Build the Future. Our mission today is to cut through conventional wisdom, extract the most impactful insights, and equip you with a fresh perspective on innovation and building the future. Get ready for some compelling ideas that might just challenge your deepest assumptions.
It's quite intriguing how Thiel isn't just offering, standard startup advice. He's inviting us to fundamentally rethink our understanding of progress, competition, and even the very nature of the future itself. This really makes one ponder. Are we actively building truly new things, or are we largely just iterating on what's already established? He pushes us to consider if we're overlooking novel opportunities by not seeking genuinely new solutions.
That distinction between true novelty and mere replication is absolutely central to Thiel's core philosophy. He breaks down progress into two categories, 0 to 1 and 1 to n. Imagine 1 to n as horizontal progress. This is about taking something that already works and just copying it, scaling it. It's easy to visualize because we know its form.
Right, like if you had one typewriter and build 100 more, that's horizontal progress.
Exactly. And on a grander scale, Thiel calls this globalization. For decades, China, for instance, has successfully copied developed world infrastructure, from 19th century railroads all the way to 20th century air conditioning. It's about spreading existing models.
Precisely. And in sharp contrast, you have 0 to 1. This represents vertical or intensive progress. This means doing something new, creating something unique that never existed before. It's much harder to conceptualize, really, because it demands genuine invention. Think of replacing that typewriter with a word processor. That's a leap. That's 0 to 1.
Ah, okay. So that's technology, essentially.
Well, yes, but Thiel defines technology very broadly. It's any new and better way of doing things, not just, computers and software. It's about creating entirely new solutions, not just replicating or optimizing the old ways.
And Thiel really stresses this point. Even highly profitable American companies face potential failure unless they continually invest in creating these new things. Just sticking to best practices can often lead straight to a dead end.
Because by definition, the best, the most innovative paths are untried, they're new.
It's a call to move beyond just tweaking things and into bold creation.
And what's profound is his belief that humans are unique in our capacity to work miracles, which is what we term technology. This ability allows us to achieve more with less. fundamentally expanding our capabilities and, quite literally, rewriting the world's blueprint. It's a powerful reminder of our inherent creative potential, which I think often gets overshadowed by just the daily grind.
And this leads to one of his most incisive ideas, doesn't it? The contrarian question.
Yes, the one he asked in job interviews and sees as vital for life. What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
It sounds so simple, but it's incredibly challenging.
It is, intellectually, because agreed upon knowledge is what's predominantly taught, so answering requires truly thinking outside established frameworks. And psychologically, it demands the courage to articulate an unpopular truth, to actually stand apart from the crowd.
So what's Thiel's own answer to that question?
Well, his answer is particularly illuminating. He contends that while most people believe globalization will define the future, the crucial truth is that technology matters more. He paints a vivid picture. Without new technology, China merely doubling its energy production, well, that just doubles its pollution. If India's vast population adopted American living standards with today's tools, the environmental catastrophe would be immense.
So globalization without new tech is unsustainable.
In his view, yes. It can lead to widespread devastation rather than universal prosperity if we don't innovate our way out of resource constraints.
That historical context really brings it into sharp focus. From the 1760s, the steam engine, right up to about 1970, we experienced this relentless technological progress.
Right, that era propelled society to unprecedented wealth.
Our parents and grandparents genuinely expected this progress to continue. Visions of 4-day work weeks, boundless cheap energy, even moon vacations were common back then.
But it didn't quite pan out that way, did it? That broad progress largely stalled. Since the 70s, only computers and communications have seen truly dramatic improvements. Much of our physical world feels, well, strangely old, as Thiel puts it.
Strange but true.
Indeed. And when we connect this to the broader picture, the stagnation since the 1970s, despite all these remarkable IT advancements, suggests a failure to sustain that relentless technological progress across the board. It makes one wonder, why did we ever expect progress to be automatic? And how do we reignite that drive for genuine creation? It underscores that technology isn't just a guaranteed outcome. It's a deliberate choice and, frankly, an investment.
So for you listening, the key takeaway here is this. True innovation isn't just about scaling existing ideas. It's about fundamentally changing the game. And that truly begins by asking those uncomfortable status quo challenging questions.
And Thiel asserts that new technology primarily emerges from new ventures, from startups, small, focused groups with a strong sense of mission, like the Founding Fathers or Fairchild Semiconductor's Traitorous 8, have consistently been the catalysts for world-changing innovation.
Not the big established players necessarily.
Right. Large organizations, just by their very nature, are often slow, bureaucratic, and bound by entrenched interests that tend to shy away from significant risk. A lone genius might create a masterpiece, maybe some great art, but rarely an entire industry. Thiel defines a startup as the largest group of people you can convince of a plan to build a different future. Its primary strength isn't just agility, though that helps. It's its capacity for new thinking.
So this deep dive isn't about finding a magic formula then?
Not at all. It's more about an exercise in thinking from first principles, questioning every received idea, every bit of conventional wisdom. It's about cultivating that mindset of constant inquiry and, frankly, bold conviction.
Thinking from first principles often means reevaluating the lessons we think we've learned from the past. Thiel brings up Nietzsche's observation here.
Ah, yes, that madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule.
Exactly. And this is critical for business. If you can spot a widespread yet delusional popular belief, you often find a hidden contrarian truth right behind it.
Like in the late 1990s, the very basic truth that companies exist to make money was, well, it was utterly lost. Page views somehow became a more celebrated metric than actual profit.
Right, that madness of crowds. It only looks arbitrary now, in hindsight. At the time, it felt completely rational to many.
And the internet bubble of the 90s, the biggest since 1929, it still distorts much of our contemporary thinking about technology. Understanding its true history, beyond just the nostalgia, is vital.
Why? To avoid repeating the same mistakes.
Well, yes, but maybe more importantly, to avoid learning the wrong lessons from its collapse, which Thiel argues is exactly what happened.
So what was that period really like? The early to mid-90s weren't just a boom, right?
Not at all. They were marked by recession, a slow recovery, manufacturing decline, and a lot of anxiety about globalization. Remember Ross Perot's surprisingly strong showing in '92. That reflected real unease about jobs moving elsewhere.
And Silicon Valley itself wasn't exactly booming then either.
No, it felt sluggish. Japan was dominating the semiconductor market. The internet itself was restricted commercially until late 1992 and frankly lacked user-friendly browsers. It's telling that in 1985, economics, not computer science, was the hot major at Stanford.
Until the browsers came along.
Exactly. The Mosaic browser in '93, then Netscape Navigator in '94. Its adoption was incredibly rapid. Netscape IPO'd in August '95 despite being unprofitable. Others like Yahoo and Amazon quickly followed suit with soaring valuations. And even as Alan Greenspan warned of irrational exuberance in '96, you had global crises unfolding: the East Asian financial crisis, the Russian ruble crisis, skepticism about the euro. In that context, the internet started to look like the only way forward when the old economies seemed to be failing.
Which led to the real mania period.
Right, about 18 months, from September '98 to March 2000. A genuine gold rush in Silicon Valley. Lavish launch parties, instant paper millionaires, companies being flipped with almost casual disregard.
And the most successful companies were the ones losing the most money.
It sounds bizarre now, but yes. They embraced what Thiel calls an anti-business model, losing money as they grew. It was a time where adding .com to your name could literally double your valuation overnight. Irrationality felt rational.
Thiel experienced this firsthand with PayPal, didn't he?
He did. He admits he was scared out of his wits by the casualness of it all. PayPal's initial grand mission was to create a new internet currency. Their first product idea, beaming money via Palm Pilots, failed spectacularly.
Didn't it get voted one of the worst business ideas?
It did in 1999. So they pivoted to email payments. But growth was slow until they adopted a really radical, really costly strategy.
Paying people to sign up.
Exactly. $10 for joining, $10 for referrals. This led to exponential growth, but also massive costs. They saw it as sane, though, because they believed a large user base offered a clear path to profit through small transaction fees later.
And the timing of their funding was crucial.
Absolutely critical. They raised $100 million in March 2000, literally just as the bubble burst. That funding bought them the vital time they needed to actually reach profitability and succeed.
So when the Nasdaq plummeted, what happened then? It went from over 5,000 down to nearly 1,100.
Well, many interpreted it as a kind of divine judgment against all that tech optimism. The future suddenly felt fundamentally indefinite, uncertain, and globalization, not technology, became the new great hope.
And from that wreckage, Silicon Valley learned some lessons.
Yes, 4 lessons that Thiel argues solidified into widely accepted but ultimately damaging dogmas. First, make incremental advances. Big visions were now suspect. Small, safe steps seemed prudent.
Okay, what else?
Second, stay lean and flexible, which often became code for unplanned or agnostic experimentation. Basically, iterate constantly, don't commit to a firm plan. Third, improve on the competition. Don't try to create brand new markets. Just build slightly better versions of products already offered by successful competitors. Play it safe.
And the last one?
Fourth, focus on product, not sales. The belief was, if your product needs advertising or a sales team, it just isn't good enough. Only viral growth was considered sustainable or valid.
But Thiel argues these were the wrong takeaways.
Completely wrong, in his view, and often counterproductive. His contrarian principles advocate pretty much the exact opposite.
Which are?
1, it's better to risk boldness than triviality. 2, a bad plan is better than no plan. 3, competitive markets destroy profits. And 4, sales matters just as much as product.
Wow. So the crash was this peak of insanity, but also maybe a peak of clarity.
That's his take. People saw the undeniable need for new technology. To reignite that drive, he suggests we actually need to return to some of that 1999-style hubris, that ambition.
It really makes you wonder how much of today's business thinking is still shaped by those perhaps mistaken reactions to past crashes rather than genuine first principles.
Exactly. It's about developing the capacity to think for yourself, critically analyze those inherited lessons, not just reactively opposing the crowd or blindly following dogma.
So for you, the aspiring innovator, this really means questioning everything, even the advice that sounds safe and sensible. It means daring to be bold, to truly aim for that 0 to 1, and not being afraid to challenge the prevailing orthodoxies. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit controversial. We're constantly taught that competition is the lifeblood of capitalism, right? That it drives innovation, benefits consumers.
It's practically gospel in economics and business schools.
But what if that's wrong? What if competition is actually capitalism's kryptonite? What if monopolies, the kind Thiel describes, are actually where the real sustainable value is created?
That's precisely Thiel's argument. He poses this provocative business question: what valuable company is nobody building? Because, he argues, it's not enough just to create value. You absolutely have to capture some of that value too.
And he uses the airline industry versus Google to make this point, right?
Yes, it's a stark comparison. In 2012, U.S. airlines collectively created hundreds of billions in value, flying millions of people. But their profit? A tiny 37 cents per passenger trip?
Basically nothing, considering the scale.
Exactly. Now compare that to Google. Arguably creating less total value than the entire airline industry combined, but it captured a massive 21% profit margin. That made Google worth 3 times more than every single U.S. airline put together.
And the difference is competition versus monopoly.
Precisely. Airlines are locked in brutal, cutthroat competition. Google, certainly back then in search, operated largely as a monopoly. It owned its market.
Which brings us back to those basic economic models we learned about. Perfect competition versus monopoly.
Right. In the textbooks, perfect competition is often held up as the ideal. Loads of firms, identical products, no market power, profits competed down to zero in the long run. No single company makes a real economic profit.
Whereas a monopoly.
A monopoly is a firm that effectively owns its market because it offers something unique with no close substitutes. This lets it set prices and maximize profits. Now, Thiel isn't talking about illegal cartels or bullying competitors. He means being so uniquely good at what you do that you escape competition altogether.
Like Google and search back then.
Exactly. They distance themselves from rivals like Microsoft and Yahoo very effectively early on. The critical insight here is that capitalism relies on capital accumulation, but perfect competition destroys all profits. So the lesson for any entrepreneur is stark. Whatever you do, don't build an undifferentiated commodity business.
So how do companies actually navigate this? Thiel says they often tell, well, lies about their market position.
Yes, it's fascinating. Monopolists tend to downplay their dominance to avoid scrutiny, regulation, antitrust action. Take Google again. Controls maybe 68% of the search market, clearly a monopoly. To Google is literally a verb.
Right.
But they often frame themselves as just a tiny player in much larger markets. Like, oh, we're only 3.4% of the global advertising market, or less than 0.24% of the global consumer tech market.
Hey.
This helps deflect attention, even though most of their revenue comes directly from those search ads where they dominate.
And non-monopolists tell the opposite lie.
Exactly. They often claim, oh, we're in a league of our own, drastically understating their competition by defining their market way too narrowly.
Like the British restaurant example.
Right. A British restaurant in Palo Alto might claim to own the entire market for British food there. But the real market is probably all Palo Alto restaurants, maybe even all restaurants within a certain radius. Most new restaurants fail precisely because they focus on trivial differentiators, like my great-grandmother's naan recipe, instead of acknowledging the brutal competitive landscape.
And PayPal versus those restaurants.
Thiel uses that example. PayPal, as the only email-based payments company on Castro Street at the time, was far more valuable than all the competing restaurants combined, even with fewer employees. Monopolists frame using union logic, search or mobile or self-driving cars, are our markets. Non-monopolists use intersection logic. British food and restaurant, and Palo Alto is our tiny, unique market.
And the cost of being in those competitive markets goes beyond just lower profits, right?
Absolutely. Competitive businesses, like restaurants, are forced into these fierce, often zero-sum battles. It leads to thin margins, minimum wages, immense pressure. Thiel even mentions the tragic cases of Michelin star chefs driven to suicide by the relentless pressure.
Whereas monopolies.
Monopolies, like Google, can actually afford to care more about their workers, their products, even their impact on the world. Think about their old motto, don't be evil. Whether you think they lived up to it or not, it reflects a business successful enough to even consider ethics beyond the bottom line. In hyper-competitive markets, money is everything. For monopolists, it's just one important thing among others. Only monopoly profits give you the freedom to think long-term.
That's a critical insight. Seeing competition as this potentially destructive force is the first step towards building something truly unique and valuable. It really pushes you to question assumptions about what success even looks like and the human cost involved.
Exactly. Striving for unique value, rather than getting sucked into endless rivalry, emerges as a much more sustainable and arguably more ethical path.
Thiel calls this monopoly capitalism, doesn't he? He argues these creative monopolies can actually be good.
Yes, In a static world, sure, a monopolist is just a rent collector, extracting value. But our world is dynamic. New things can be invented. Creative monopolists, he argues, provide customers with more choices by creating entirely new categories of abundance.
Okay, iPhone.
Exactly. Apple's profits from the iPhone rewarded the creation of a vastly superior product, something entirely new, not the artificial scarcity of some existing commodity. Governments even grant patents, specifically to create temporary monopolies, precisely because it incentivizes innovation.
And new monopolies displace old ones.
Right. The dynamism of new monopolies explains why old ones don't stifle innovation forever. We saw iOS overtake Microsoft, Microsoft overtake IBM, cell phones replace AT&T's landline monopoly. Progress, in this view, is a history of better monopolies replacing incumbents. Monopolies incentivize innovation. They enable long-term planning and ambitious research projects that competitive firms, constantly worried about next quarter's margins, simply can't afford. Thiel contends that economists' obsession with perfect competition is a relic of history, modeling an equilibrium state that's easy to quantify on paper. But in the real world of business, equilibrium means stasis. It means death.
So his conclusion is pretty stark.
It is. All happy companies are different. Each one earns a monopoly by solving a unique problem. All failed companies are the same. They failed to escape competition. #TagIV. Escaping competition and building a durable monopoly.
That's a really powerful statement, and it leads directly to the next question. How do you actually escape that competitive trap? Because competition, even though we praise it as healthy, can function like a deeply ingrained ideology, warping our thinking.
It really can. We preach its necessity, we internalize its commandments, but Thiel argues the more we compete, often the less we actually gain. Our education system is a prime example he uses.
How so?
With its relentless focus on grades, standardized tests, pushing the best students into fierce rivalries for these narrow, conventional career paths, management consulting, investment banking, top law firms. This process, he argues, often beats their dreams out of them, channeling ambition into predefined competitive tracks instead of encouraging unique creation.
He talks about his own experience with this too.
Yes, his pursuit of a Supreme Court clerkship. At the time, it was seen as the highest prize in law. But he realized that winning that specific, intense competition would have changed my life for the worse. It almost stopped him from creating anything new.
And that famous quote about Rhodes Scholars.
All Rhodes Scholars had a great future in their past. It's provocative, but it highlights his point about the potential downsides of winning conventional competitions. It really prompts you to reflect. Is our whole system, from school to career, inadvertently pushing us away from true innovation by making us obsessed with rivalry and predefined markers of success?
And this ties into the business as war metaphor he dislikes.
Right. Managers love quoting Clausewitz or Sun Tzu, using war metaphors. But Thiel argues it's competition, not business itself, that's like war. Allegedly necessary, supposedly valiant, but ultimately destructive. He brings in Shakespeare here, contrasting Marx's view that people fight because they are different, with Shakespeare's insight that combatants often look remarkably alike and lose sight of why they even started fighting. They grow more similar as the feud escalates. Think Romeo and Juliet, the Montagues and Capulets are practically indistinguishable by the end.
And he sees the Microsoft versus Google rivalry through this lens.
Exactly. A Shakespearean conflict. They started from very different places. Microsoft with operating systems and Office, Google with search. But as they grew, they became obsessed with each other.
Competing everywhere.
Pretty much. Windows versus Chrome OS, Bing versus Google Search, Office versus Docs, you name it. This intense rivalry, Thiel asserts, blinded them and ultimately cost them overall dominance, allowing Apple to sweep in and overtake them both. It's a vivid illustration of how focusing on a rival can make you miss the bigger picture, the more innovative opportunities.
Which leads to what he calls imitative competition.
Yeah, like that mobile credit card reader saga.
Yeah.
Square launches its little white square reader in 2010. Then NetSecure comes out with a half-moon-shaped one. Intuit makes a cylinder. PayPal offers a triangle.
The apes run out of shapes battle.
Exactly. Companies just slavishly copying each other, focusing entirely on the competition instead of creating something genuinely new or different. No real differentiation.
He even suggests that maybe being less attuned to social cues could be an advantage.
Intriguingly, yes. He floats the idea that people with Asperger's-like social ineptitude might actually have an edge in Silicon Valley. Being less sensitive to social cues, maybe they're less likely to follow the crowd or get caught up in these rivalries, less likely to give up their unique convictions. It allows for a more singular focus.
Rivalry can also make people hallucinate opportunities, he says.
Right. See opportunities where none actually exist. He points to the fierce battle in the 90s for the online pet store market, pets.com, petstore.com, petopia.com.
Oh yeah, the sock puppet.
That's the one. Companies became obsessed with defeating rivals, even though there were no substantive differences between them and the market itself wasn't really there. Pets.com burned through $300 million in investment capital and disappeared. Winning a war that wasn't worth fighting is still a loss.
He also mentions the Ellison versus Siebel feud.
A classic example of distracting rivalry. Larry Ellison at Oracle versus Tom Siebel at Siebel Systems. It involved sabotage attempts, petty attacks. While Siebel was busy creating billboards attacking Ellison, his own company, Informix, imploded in an accounting scandal, a very costly distraction from running the actual business.
And Thiel learned this lesson himself with PayPal.
He did. His company, Confinity, was in an all-out war with Elon Musk's X.com. Both were doing email payments. 100-hour work weeks, totally focused on beating the other guy.
But they merged.
Yes, the fear of the rapidly inflating tech bubble spurred them to merge in March 2000. De-escalating that intense rivalry was key to their survival after the crash. His takeaway: if you have to fight, fight to win decisively. But it's fundamentally better to recognize competition as destructive and just avoid it whenever possible.
So if avoiding competition is the goal, how do you build something that actually lasts, something durable? This brings us to the idea of last mover advantage.
Right, we hear so much about first mover advantage, but Thiel argues that's often just a tactic, not the goal. What really matters is generating cash flows far into the future. Being first doesn't mean much if someone comes along later and unseats you.
It's better to be the last one standing.
Exactly. It's better to be the last mover, to make the final great development in a specific market, and then enjoy monopoly profits for years, maybe decades. He uses the Twitter versus New York Times valuation example from 2013. Twitter was unprofitable, but valued at $24 billion, 12 times more than the profitable NYT.
Why?
Because investors saw Twitter's potential for future monopoly profits, something newspapers whose monopoly days were clearly over didn't have.
So tech companies often have most of their value way out in the future.
Absolutely. Low-growth businesses, like a newspaper or that trendy restaurant, get most of their value in the near term. Tech companies often lose money initially, sometimes for years. Most of their value might only be realized 10 or 15 years down the line. For PayPal back in 2001, he estimated 75% of its value was projected to come from profits earned in 2011 and beyond. Today, most of its value is projected from 2020 and beyond. It demands a very long-term perspective.
Which cautions against just chasing short-term growth.
Definitely. Rapid short-term growth, like we saw with Zynga or Groupon, can easily mask deeper, harder-to-measure challenges related to long-term durability. The most critical question for any business, Thiel argues, isn't just how much are we growing this quarter, but will this business still be around a decade from now? And answering that requires deep qualitative thinking, not just looking at current numbers.
Okay, so what does a company like that, one with durable future cash flows, actually look like? What are the characteristics of a strong monopoly, according to Thiel?
He identifies 4 key characteristics that often combine to create a durable monopoly. First, proprietary technology. And this isn't just slightly better tech. It needs to be at least 10 times better than the closest substitute.
10 times? That's a high bar.
It is. It makes your product incredibly difficult or impossible for others to replicate effectively. Think Google's search algorithms back then, or PayPal making eBay payments vastly superior to mailing a check, Amazon offering a drastically larger selection of books, or Apple's integrated hardware and software design making tablets truly usable for the first time. It has to be a quantum leap.
Okay, what's number 2?
Second, network effects. This is where a product becomes more useful as more people use it. Think social networks, marketplaces, but here's the crucial part Thiel emphasizes. It must be valuable to the very first users when the network is still tiny.
Start small and dense.
Exactly. Facebook started by focusing intensely on Harvard students, creating a valuable network there before expanding. Contrast this with something like Xanadu, Ted Nelson's hypertext project, which failed partly because it tried to build a global network from day one without offering immediate value to early adopters.
Got it.
Third, economies of scale. A business gets stronger as it gets bigger because it can spread fixed costs over more sales. Software startups benefit massively from this, right? The marginal cost of producing one more copy of software is often close to zero. Twitter, with hundreds of millions of users, has inherent scalability because the cost to serve one more user is minimal.
And the last one, branding.
Fourth, yes, branding. A strong brand absolutely creates a kind of monopoly. Apple is probably the strongest tech brand, built on design, the stores, the advertising, premium pricing, and of course, Steve Jobs' charisma. However, and this is critical, Paris, Thiel stresses that substance must underpin the brand. You need the proprietary tech, the scale, the network effects. Starting with brand alone, trying to build it without the underlying substance, like Marissa Mayer's attempt at Yahoo, is incredibly dangerous and usually fails.
So this framework isn't just a checklist to tick off.
Not at all. It's a way to think critically, strategically,
Yeah.
about how to build a business that doesn't just create value now, but can sustain that value, defend it for decades. It pushes you to analyze much deeper than just the surface features. You have to design for longevity from day one.
Okay, so how do you actually build a monopoly using these ideas? What's the strategy?
He suggests a clear approach. First, and maybe most counterintuitively, start small and monopolize. Always err on the side of starting too small. It's far, far easier to dominate a small, well-defined market than a large, competitive one.
Like PayPal focusing on eBay power sellers.
Exactly. They learned that lesson the hard way after failing with the broader Palm Pilot payments idea. They succeeded by focusing intensely on that specific, high-value niche of eBay power sellers. Thiel actually considers an entrepreneur aiming for just 1% of a $100 billion market to be a major red flag.
Why is that?
Because 1% of a huge market usually means you haven't defined your initial target customer well enough, and you're likely facing brutal competition from incumbents. Large markets are hard. Small, niche markets are where you can actually establish dominance first.
Okay, so start small, dominate, then what?
Then scaling up. Once you've thoroughly dominated that initial niche, you gradually, methodically expand into related and slightly broader markets. Think about Amazon. Started with books, dominated books online, then expanded to CDs, then videos, then software, slowly evolving step by step into the world's general store.
Or eBay, starting with niche collectibles.
Right? eBay started with things like Beanie Baby obsessives before becoming a much broader marketplace. This deliberate, disciplined sequencing of markets is often underestimated, but it's absolutely vital for building a lasting monopoly.
And he has strong views on disruption.
He does. Third point, don't disrupt. The Silicon Valley obsession with disruption has become a buzzword that often just means picking fights companies can't actually win.
But isn't disruption sometimes good? Clayton Christensen's idea.
Thiel acknowledges the original meaning a low-end product eventually displacing incumbents is valid. But the current self-congratulatory fad around the term is often misleading and counterproductive. Look at Napster. It directly challenged the entire music industry. Pure disruption. It ended in bankruptcy.
Where's PayPal?
PayPal, by contrast, actually expanded the overall market for online payments. It provided more business to Visa than it took away initially, creating a positive dynamic, not a purely adversarial one. His core message is consistent. Avoid competition whenever and wherever possible. Don't go looking for fights.
Okay, start small, scale carefully, don't pick unnecessary fights. And the last point ties back to timing.
Right, his advice to be the last mover. Forget first mover advantage as the ultimate goal. That can be a tactical illusion. What truly matters is generating those cash flows far into the future.
Being the last great development in a market.
Exactly. It's better to make the last, most significant development in a specific market and then enjoy the resulting monopoly profits for years or even decades. This requires studying the end game before everything else, like a chess grandmaster planning many moves ahead. Focus on long-term endurance, not just short-term wins or being first out of the gate.
When we think about building for the future, this fundamental question always seems to pop up. Is success mostly about luck, or is it skill? You hear successful people attribute it to luck all the time. Malcolm Gladwell writes about it, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates have all mentioned luck.
It's true, many do. But then you have serial entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk, who really push back against that narrative. Jack Dorsey famously tweeted, "Success is never accidental."
So can we settle that debate?
Probably not objectively. Every company's story is unique. As Thiel says, statistics doesn't work when the sample size is one. But historically, the prevailing attitude was different. People believed you could and should make your own luck through hard work, planning, and conviction.
And this belief about whether you can control the future has huge implications.
Absolutely profound implications. Thiel frames it as definite versus indefinite thinking. If you believe in a definite future, one you can shape, Then you make concrete plans and you work diligently to bring that future about. You hold firm convictions. You strive to become, in his words, a monopoly of one in something truly significant.
And if you believe the future is indefinite,
If you expect an indefinite future, one basically ruled by randomness and chance, then you effectively give up on mastering it. Thiel argues these indefinite attitudes explain a lot of our current societal dysfunction. Well, process starts to trump substance. Students, for example, meticulously curate these incredibly diverse resumes, hedging their bets for some unknowable future. They end up preparing for nothing in particular, rather than committing deeply to the one best path they see. It's a societal shift away from strong conviction towards broad, unfocused optionality.
so it's worth asking ourselves, and you listening, is our society maybe drifting towards this indefinite future? And if it is, what are the real costs, the hidden consequences of that drift?
Thiel outlines 4 ways societies can view the future, based on combining optimism or pessimism with definite or indefinite thinking. It's a really useful framework.
Okay, let's walk through them. What's the first one?
First is indefinite pessimism. He sees this as characterizing much of Europe since the 1970s. The outlook is generally bleak, but there's no clear plan for what to do about it. It leads to this kind of undirected bureaucratic drift.
Just reacting to events.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Kicking the can down the road, hoping things don't get worse. Think about the recurring euro crises. Thiel suggests this attitude might even manifest in things like vacation mania, an escape when you don't see a constructive path forward.
Okay, what's next?
Second is definite pessimism. Thiel attributes this view primarily to China today. Here, the future is seen as knowable, but it's expected to be challenging, maybe even harsh. So the focus is on rigorous preparation.
Building and copying.
Exactly. China's rapid growth comes largely from relentlessly copying the developed West, that one-to-N globalization we talked about, executing very definite plans to build more factories, more cities, more infrastructure. Having experienced famine and hardship, the leadership takes the future extremely seriously.
Then the optimistic views.
Right. Third is definite optimism. This, he argues, characterized the Western world from roughly the 17th century right through the 1950s and 60s. This is the powerful belief that the future will be better if we actively plan it and work towards it.
The era of big projects.
Absolutely. Scientists, engineers, doctors, businessmen, visibly making the world richer, healthier, more connected. Think the massive engineering feats. London's Thames Tunnel, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal. Even during the Great Depression, the U.S. built the Empire State Building, the Golden Gate Bridge, launched the Manhattan Project, and later the Apollo program. People believed in grand, definite plans.
He mentions that plan to dam the San Francisco Bay.
Yeah, John Reber, a schoolteacher in the 40s and 50s, seriously proposed completely reinventing the San Francisco Bay with massive dams and freshwater lakes. And people took such ambitious plans seriously back then. Today, Thiel suggests, such a vision would probably be dismissed immediately as crankery or dangerous hubris.
Which brings us to the fourth category, where we are now maybe.
That's Thiel's argument, indefinite optimism. This has dominated American thinking, he believes, since about 1982. Here, the future is expected to be better, somehow, but nobody has any specific plans for how it will get better.
We expect to profit from the future, but we don't feel the need to design it.
Exactly. This manifests in careers focused on rearranging existing things: finance, law, consulting, private equity. These fields attract optionality chasers, people building those diverse resumes for an unknowable future. Baby boomers, who grew up experiencing seemingly effortless progress, developed great expectations but few specific plans.
And Malcolm Gladwell fits in here.
Thiel sees Gladwell's popular explanations of success, which often emphasize context, serendipity, and accumulated advantage rather than singular vision or definite plans, as perfectly encapsulating this generational perspective of indefinite optimism.
Wow. That framework really forces you to think about societal choices differently. What is the long-term cost of an indefinitely optimistic society that stops making concrete plans and just hopes things work out?
It's a profound challenge to our current cultural default, isn't it? And Thiel argues this indefinite optimism permeates almost everything.
Like finance.
Indefinite finance is a prime example. Money seems to make more money, often detached from the creation of real wealth in the tangible world. Founders sell companies, the capital flows into diversified portfolios, but there's often little clarity on how that money will be used to build specific new things. Money becomes an end, not a means.
And politics.
Indefinite politics. Politicians often tailor their images and policies to shifting polling data, rather than articulating bold visionary predictions or plans. Government focus shifts towards insurance and transfer payments, Medicare, Social Security managing the present, rather than investing in complex, definite solutions for the future.
Even philosophy.
Even indefinite philosophy. Modern philosophers like Rawls and Nozick, despite their significant differences, primarily focused on processes, fairness, rights, the distribution of existing resources, rather than articulating concrete visions for what a better future society would actually look like. Arguing over process becomes a convenient way to indefinitely defer actual planning.
And our approach to life itself.
Indefinite life. We tend to treat aging and death as inevitable, random events, largely giving up on the ambitious quest for radical life extension. Modern drug discovery, he argues, often overly relies on amplifying serendipity, randomly screening compounds, even as Eroom's law, the inverse of Moore's law for pharma, shows drug discovery becoming exponentially more expensive and less productive. Biotech's genuine difficulty sometimes becomes an excuse for indefinite, iterative business approaches rather than bold, definite bets.
So is this indefinite optimism even sustainable? Can the future get better if no one plans for it?
Thiel argues it's inherently unsustainable. U.S. households save almost nothing. Companies hoard cash on their balance sheets, often because they lack concrete plans for new investments. The common justification for progress without planning is often evolution, borrowing from Darwin.
Like the lean startup idea, adapt, evolve, iterate.
Right. Those buzzwords are popular. But Thiel argues that iteration without a bold, overarching plan usually just leads you to a local maximum. You optimize something small, make incremental gains, but you miss the truly game-changing 0-to-1 leap.
So in startups, it's not evolution, it's design.
Exactly. In startups, intelligent design works best. Great entrepreneurs are fundamentally designers. Steve Jobs' greatest design wasn't just the iPhone, it was Apple, the business itself. Apple meticulously executed definite multi-year plans to create and distribute entirely new product categories, often underestimated by analysts focused on the short term.
And that power of planning explains why founders with strong plans often don't sell.
Precisely. Think of Mark Zuckerberg rejecting Yahoo's $1 billion offer for Facebook early on. He had a definite long-term plan that outsiders couldn't fully see or value yet. There's immense hidden value in a well-articulated long-term plan, backed by conviction.
So the final message here is quite personal.
Very much so. You are not a lottery ticket. We need a cultural shift, he argues, back towards embracing a definite future. And a startup offers a unique vehicle for this. It's the largest endeavor over which you can potentially exercise definite mastery, granting you real agency over your life and a tangible part of the world.
Yeah.
It all starts by rejecting the unjust tyranny of chance and choosing to design your future.
Okay, here's another concept that really shifts how you look at things. This isn't just abstract statistics. Thiel argues it's a fundamental law of the universe explaining success and failure, a law most of us don't even consciously see.
He kicks it off with that quote from the Gospel of Matthew. For whoever has will be given more. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. Money makes money. Success breeds success.
And this connects to the idea of radically disproportionate results.
Exactly. Small minorities consistently achieve wildly outsized outcomes. We see hints of this in the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule Vilfredo Pareto observed back in 1906. 20% of the people own 80% of the land, 20% of the pea pods produce 80% of the peas.
But Thiel says it's even more extreme than 80-20.
Much more extreme. He called it the power law. It's described by exponential equations showing severely unequal distributions. It's not just 80-20, it might be 90-10 or 99-1. He argues this law of the universe defines our surroundings so completely we often don't even notice it.
Like earthquakes or cities.
Right. The biggest earthquakes release vastly more energy than all the smaller ones combined. The largest cities dwarf all the towns in smaller cities. This fundamental pattern of extreme inequality is everywhere, but Thiel argues it's frequently overlooked, especially where it matters most, like in venture capital.
Ah, the power law of venture capital. How does that work?
Well, VCs fund early-stage companies, knowing most will fail. But a common, often fatal error is expecting returns to follow a normal distribution, a bell curve.
Where most companies are average, some fail, some do okay.
Right. They expect bad companies to fail, mediocre ones to break even, and good ones to return maybe 2x to 4x their investment. This thinking often leads to a spray and pray diversification strategy, investing in lots of companies, hoping a few do okay. But this usually just results in a portfolio full of flops.
Because the reality is different.
Drastically different. Venture returns rigorously follow a power law. A tiny, tiny handful of companies in a successful portfolio will radically outperform all the others combined. At his own firm, Founders Fund, Thiel saw this firsthand. Facebook, their single best investment in their 2005 fund, returned more value than all the other investments in that fund put together. Palantir, the second best, is projected to return more than the sum of every other investment except Facebook.
Wow. So one or two investments make the entire fund.
Essentially, yes. This reveals what he calls the biggest secret in venture capital. The best investment in a successful fund equals or outperforms the entire rest of the fund combined.
Which leads to some pretty strange rules for VCs.
Very strange, counterintuitive rules. Rule number 1, only invest in companies that have the potential to return the value of the entire fund by themselves. Think about that.
That's an incredibly high bar.
It is. And rule number 2 follows directly. Because rule number 1 is so restrictive, there basically can't be any other rules. You have to find those potential outliers and back them with everything you have.
He uses the Andreessen Horowitz investment in Instagram as an example.
Yeah. A $250,000 investment returned $78 million in less than 2 years. A huge 312x return. Sounds amazing, right? But for their $1.5 billion fund, they'd need roughly 19 Instagram-level successes just to break even.
So it really underscores the need to find those massive winners.
Absolutely. VCs must identify and back those potential power law winners with every available resource. Portfolio thinking in the traditional diversification sense can actually be detrimental for a VC. It can psychologically prepare you to lose, turning investments into just buying a bunch of lottery tickets.
This really challenges our gut feeling about success, doesn't it? That bell curve idea is so ingrained.
It is. The power law dictates that true breakthroughs, the massive successes, are incredibly rare and disproportionately valuable. It's a truth often hidden by our day-to-day experiences and our tendency towards linear thinking. It demands a completely different investment philosophy, concentrating bets on potential outliers, not spreading them thinly.
So why don't more people see this power law in action?
Well, partly because it often becomes clear only over a long period. Early-stage companies can look very similar before one takes off with exponential growth. Investors also naturally spend a lot of time dealing with the early-stage companies that seem average, and probably even more time dealing with the problematic ones than the ones that are clearly succeeding. The outliers almost take care of themselves.
But the impact of these outliers is huge.
Colossal. Despite its invisibility, think about this. Venture-backed companies represent less than 1% of new businesses formed each year and get less than 0.2% of GDP investment. Yet they disproportionately drive the economy, creating 11% of private sector jobs, generating 21% of GDP revenue. The dozen largest U.S. tech companies, all VC-backed at some point, are worth trillions combined. The power law effect is massive, even if the pattern itself is often missed.
And this isn't just for VCs. Thiel says everyone is an investor.
Exactly. Entrepreneurs invest their time, their life energy, into startups. Individuals invest years, decades into their careers. The common advice, don't put all your eggs in one basket, the portfolio approach, can be seriously misleading when applied to your life.
You can't diversify your life.
You really can't. An entrepreneur can't effectively run dozens of companies simultaneously. An individual can't diversify across dozens of equally possible careers. Yet schools often teach the opposite. Oh, it doesn't matter so much what you do as long as you do it well. Thiel argues that's fundamentally false.
What should you do instead?
He argues you should relentlessly focus on something you are exceptionally good at. But, and this is the crucial first step, before you commit, you must think incredibly hard about whether that skill, that domain, that company will actually be valuable and significant in the future.
So choosing the right thing to focus on is paramount.
It's everything. For career choices, maybe don't start your own company right away. Joining the right company, the very best one you can find while it's still growing fast, could be far more valuable in the long run. He points out that owning even 0.01% of Google turned out to be worth over $35 million.
And if you do start a company?
Remember, the power law applies there too. Focus ruthlessly. One key market to dominate first. One primary distribution strategy that works best. Recognize that some moments, some decisions will matter far, far more than others. And what's most important is rarely obvious. It might even be a secret. #ShopTagAvil7. Finding and leveraging secrets for success.
Which leads us right into the next big theme, secrets. For you listening, this means challenging that often unstated assumption that everything important has already been discovered. It means actively searching for those hidden truths that can unlock entirely new possibilities.
Thiel's starting point is that every famous, now conventional idea, Pythagoras' theorem, Newton's laws, you name it, was once a secret, known only to a few, or maybe just one. Conventional truths, while necessary, offer no edge. They're already priced in, so to speak.
So that contrarian question, what important truth do very few people agree with you on, only really makes sense if secrets still exist.
Exactly. If everything is known, there are no contrarian truths left to find. He makes a useful distinction here between secrets and mysteries. Secrets are things that are important and unknown, something hard to do but doable. Mysteries, on the other hand, are things that might be impossible to figure out, like the ultimate nature of string theory, maybe.
And the answer to the business contrarian question, what valuable company is nobody building, is always a secret.
It has to be. If it were obvious, someone would already be doing it. So the crucial question becomes, why aren't more people actively looking for secrets?
He mentions the Unabomber here, Ted Kaczynski.
Yes, as an extreme example of someone who believed all the hard, important problems were already solved. Kaczynski felt that left only pursuing easy problems, which is boring, or impossible ones, which is discouraging. This led to his profound dissatisfaction and, well, his terrible actions. Thiel sees echoes of this loss of faith in new frontiers, perhaps less dramatically, in things like hipster culture's obsession with faux vintage.
As if everything worthwhile has been done, let's just ironically celebrate the past.
Something like that. He also points to various forms of fundamentalism, religious, environmental, even free market fundamentalism. They offer easy answers or declare certain questions off limits as divine mysteries or market dictates, avoiding the methy, difficult search for secrets in the middle ground.
And the lack of physical frontiers plays a role.
He thinks so. In the past, you could literally be an explorer, chart unknown territories. Today, the unknown seems less tangible, less accessible, which might contribute to this feeling that there's nothing truly new left to discover.
He identifies 4 specific social trends that discourage secret-seeking.
Right. First, incrementalism. We're trained from school onwards to take small, safe steps. Doing just slightly more than expected is rewarded. Radical leaps are often seen as risky or disruptive in a bad way. Think of academics chasing incremental publications rather than tackling huge, risky questions.
Second,
Risk aversion. People are terrified of being wrong, especially of being lonely and wrong. Secrets, by definition, are unvetted by the mainstream. Pursuing them means risking standing alone and potentially failing, which is unbearable for many.
third is complacency.
Yes, complacency. Thiel observes, somewhat cynically perhaps, that social elites, the people who often have the most freedom and resources to explore new ideas, paradoxically seem to believe in secrets the least. They're often comfortable collecting rents from existing systems and achievements. Why rock the boat?
And the last one is flatness.
Fourth, flatness. Borrowing from Thomas Friedman's idea, the perception of a hyper-connected, intensely competitive global marketplace makes individuals doubt their own ability to contribute something truly unique. The thinking goes, if this secret were real, wouldn't someone smarter somewhere else have found it already?
He worries about the loss of cults.
Well, he frames it provocatively. He says while we might be glad there are fewer obviously crazy cults today, this gain might have come at the cost of our collective sense of wonder as secrets left to be discovered. We've maybe become too rational, too conventional.
So if you don't believe in secrets, what kind of world do you see?
You implicitly believe that all the big questions have basically been answered. All the major injustices, like slavery, which was once a hidden injustice, have been recognized. You might have excessive faith in efficient markets, ignoring obvious historical bubbles like the internet in '99 or housing in '05-'08.
He uses Hewlett-Packard's decline as a case study here.
Yes, a really poignant one. HP invented relentlessly through the '90s. Then around 2000, it largely stopped inventing, despite branding campaigns saying invent. It merged with Compaq. Its board became dysfunctional. A faction focused on rules, oversight, and process, led by banker Patricia Dunn, ultimately won out over a faction wanting to build new technology, led by engineer Tom Perkins. They essentially abandoned the search for technological secrets, and HP's value plummeted. It's a cautionary tale about losing that founding spirit of invention. But the case for secrets is strong. You simply can't find them if you don't look. Think of Andrew Wiles proving Fermat's last theorem after 358 years of failed attempts by others. That required not just brilliance, but profound, unwavering faith in secrets.
And there are still huge secrets out there.
Thiel is convinced there are many more secrets left to find in science, medicine, engineering, technology, curing cancer, finding new energy sources, enabling space travel. We have to demand to know them and force ourselves to look.
And in business, too.
Absolutely. Great companies are built on what he calls open but unsuspected secrets. Think about Airbnb. They saw untapped supply, spare rooms, empty apartments, and unaddressed demand. Affordable local travel experiences where everyone else just saw nothing, or maybe just Craig's.
A Lyft and Uber.
Right. Built billion-dollar businesses simply by connecting existing drivers with potential riders, seeing a massive opportunity beyond the rigid conventional taxi system. The very simplicity of many great internet companies like Facebook initially often leads them to be underestimated. Yet these elementary, often overlooked insights, these secrets hidden in plain sight, can support incredibly valuable businesses.
So how do you actually find these secrets? Where should you look?
He suggests two broad categories. First, secrets of nature, discovering unknown aspects of the physical world. This is what physicists or biologists often focus on. Second, and perhaps relatively underappreciated, are secrets about people. Things people don't know about themselves, or things they actively try to hide because they're forbidden or taboo.
So asking, what are people not allowed to talk about?
Exactly. What's forbidden? What's considered impolite or unconventional to discuss? Sometimes both types of secrets, nature and people, lead to the same underlying truth, like the monopoly secret we discussed. It's both an economic reality and something companies try to hide.
And where should you focus your search?
Where no one else is looking. Fields that clearly matter but haven't been standardized, institutionalized, or already picked over by the smartest people. He uses nutrition as an example.
Nutrition?
Really? Think about it. It affects everyone profoundly, yet you can't major in nutrition at Harvard. Most top scientists work in other fields. Much existing research is flawed, influenced by lobbying like the old food pyramid, potentially aggravating problems like obesity. He claims, we know more about the physics of faraway stars than we know about human nutrition. It's hard, yes, but not impossible. A prime area where significant secrets likely still exist.
Okay, so you find a secret, then what? Do you shout it from the rooftops?
Not necessarily. It depends heavily on the secret itself. Thiel advises, unless you have perfectly conventional beliefs, it's rarely a good idea to tell everybody everything that you know.
So what's the best way to handle a secret?
He suggests the golden mean is often a company. Every great business is built around a secret that's hidden from the outside. A great company is a conspiracy to change the world. When you share your secret with co-founders, early employees, the recipient becomes a fellow conspirator. It's about finding those hidden paths and using that secret knowledge to build something unique rather than just following the well-trodden road.
This next point is crucial for anyone thinking about starting something new. For you listening, this means realizing that your very first steps, the choices that seem small at the beginning, have these outsized, almost cosmic consequences for your entire venture. They can literally make or break everything down the line.
Thiel puts it very bluntly with what's sometimes called Thiel's law. A startup messed up at its foundation cannot be fixed. He really emphasizes that beginnings are special, qualitatively different from everything that follows.
Like the Big Bang or the U.S. Constitution.
Exactly. He uses those analogies, just like the first microseconds of the universe set the laws of physics, or the compromises made during the few months the U.S. Constitution was drafted in 1787, are incredibly hard to change even centuries later. The initial decisions in a startup have enormous inertia. Bad decisions made early on, choosing the wrong co-founders, hiring the wrong initial team members, setting up the wrong structure, are extremely difficult, maybe impossible to correct later without some kind of massive crisis, like near bankruptcy forcing a total reset.
So your first job as a founder is just getting these initial things right.
Absolutely critical. And the very first decision is often who you start it with. Choosing a co-founder, Thiel says, is like getting married. And founder conflict is messy, like divorce. Initial optimism often blinds people to potential problems down the road.
He gives an example from one of his PayPal co-founders, Luke Nosek.
Right. Nosek's first startup failed largely because of a terrible co-founder match. He, an eccentric thinker, paired up with a standard MBA type they'd met casually at a networking event. Thiel dismisses this as being no better than marrying the first person you meet at the slot machines in Vegas.
Ouch. So what should founders look for?
He stresses they should share a prehistory. They need to know each other well, understand how they work together under pressure, know their strengths and weaknesses. It goes way beyond just having complementary resumes or skill sets. It's about deep compatibility and trust built over time.
Okay, so you have the right co-founders. What's next? Aligning interests.
Yes. You need good people who get along, and you need a structure that keeps everyone aligned for the long term. Thiel breaks down the structure using three concepts: ownership, possession, and control.
Ownership is who holds the equity.
Right. Founders, employees, investors who legally own shares of the company. Possession is who actually runs the company day to day, the managers, the employees doing the work. And control is who formally governs its affairs, usually the board of directors.
And these can get misaligned.
Easily. In theory, this division of labor works. In practice, it multiplies the opportunities for conflicting interests and incentives. He uses the DMV as an extreme example.
How so?
Well, we, the people, might technically own the DMV, but the clerks working there, the possessors, have the real day-to-day power, and the bureaucracy often seems misaligned with the interests of both the owners, citizens, and the controllers, politicians.
And in big corporations.
You see it there, too. A CEO of a large public company might own only a tiny fraction of the stock. Their incentives might be driven more by the power of possession salary, perks like a private jet, short-term stock bumps affecting bonuses rather than maximizing long-term shareholder value, ownership.
How does this play out in startups?
In early startups, founders typically have both ownership, significant equity, and possession. They run the company. Conflicts more often arise between ownership and control, that is, between the founders and the board, particularly investors on the board. For example, disagreements over the timing of an IPO or a sale.
What about the board itself? How should that be structured?
Thiel is a strong advocate for small boards. Less is more. He suggests an ideal board has just 3 members and should almost never exceed 5 for a private company. Why? Because a small, effective board can actually be forceful and provide real oversight. A huge board, paradoxically, often provides no effective oversight at all because responsibility gets diffused. Choosing board members wisely is absolutely critical.
That highlights how fundamental alignment is, not just talent. Makes you wonder about those unseen power struggles when ownership, possession, and control aren't in sync.
Definitely. And alignment extends to the whole team. Thiel has this stark rule, on the bus or off the bus. As a general rule, everyone involved with your company should be full-time.
No part-timers, no consultants.
He argues against them generally. Anyone who doesn't have stock options or a regular salary is fundamentally misaligned. They're incentivized to claim near-term value, like consulting fees, rather than focusing solely on creating long-term future value for the company. Even remote work, he suggests, should be avoided if possible early on, as subtle misalignments can creep in more easily. The commitment should be binary.
And compensation plays a big role in alignment, too. He says cash is not king.
Right. It's another counterintuitive point. He observed a clear pattern from hundreds of startups. A company does better the less it pays the CEO. Specifically for early-stage, venture-backed CEOs, he argues the salary should ideally not exceed $150,000 per year.
Why so low?
High cash pay incentivizes defending the status quo, protecting that salary. It makes the CEO more like a politician managing things than a founder focused on radical value creation. A cash-poor executive, Thiel argues, is forced to focus entirely on increasing the company's value because that's where their potential upside lies, through equity.
And low CEO pay sets the tone.
Exactly. It sets the standard for everyone else. He mentions Aaron Levy, a box living simply and paying himself the least early on, demonstrating commitment. Cash compensation fundamentally incentivizes short-term thinking and value grabbing. It's about the present, not the future.
So startups should use equity instead.
Yes. Vested interest through equity, part ownership. That's the one form of compensation that perfectly aligns people toward creating future value. But it's tricky.
How so?
Equity allocation is hard. Giving everyone equal shares often seems unfair because contributions inevitably differ. But giving unequal shares can also cause resentment and conflict. Achieving perfect fairness from day one is basically impossible. Thiel actually advises keeping individual ownership details secret internally. Revealing them company-wide is like dropping a nuclear bomb on morale.
And people might not even want equity initially.
True. Many people find equity unattractive at first. It's illiquid, it's tied entirely to this one risky company, it's potentially worthless if the company fails. But, and this is key, precisely because of these limitations, equity acts as a powerful filter and signal. Anyone who actively prefers equity over cash is revealing a belief in the company's long-term future and a personal commitment to helping create that value.
So getting these foundations right allows you to extend the founding moment.
That's the idea. The founding moment, when the rules are set, technically only happens once. But the spirit of the founding, that openness to invention, that drive to create new things, can be extended. The most valuable companies manage to maintain this characteristic of beginnings. A company's founding really lasts as long as it's still creating new things, still operating in that 0 to 1 mode. If you get the foundations right, you can potentially steer its future toward continued creation, extending its founding indefinitely. It's about building a company designed for continuous invention and renewal. #IX. If you build it, will they come? The hidden power of sales.
Okay, let's shift gears. You might naturally think that in innovation, the engineers, the product builders, the inventors, they're the real heroes, right? They create the amazing new thing.
That's certainly the common perception, especially in tech circles.
But what if the most critical, often completely hidden ingredient for success is something else entirely? Something that's frequently dismissed, maybe even looked down upon? Thiel makes a powerful case for the underrated importance of sales and distribution.
He argues that sales is literally everywhere. Yet most people, particularly in Silicon Valley, profoundly underestimate it. Engineers especially are often biased towards building cool stuff and assume its coolness alone will attract users.
The field of dreams fallacy.
Exactly. That if you build it, they will come. Conceit is incredibly popular, but almost always false. Customers won't just magically appear because you build something great. You have to make them come. You have to reach them, persuade them. And that, Thiel insists, is often far harder work than the initial invention.
This brings up that nerds versus salesmen tension he describes.
Yes. The advertising and sales industries in the U.S. are massive, employing millions. But nerds, engineers, technical people are often deeply skeptical of sales, marketing, advertising. They tend to view it as superficial, maybe even irrational or manipulative.
But advertising clearly works.
It absolutely works, even subtly on the skeptics themselves, embedding impressions that influence later decisions. Engineers tend to value transparency, rationality, clear technical merits. Sales, by contrast, often involves an orchestrated campaign to change surface appearances, which can strike technically minded people as fundamentally dishonest or trivial. What they often miss, Thiel says, is that it takes hard work to make sales look easy. Good selling is often invisible.
And sales is hidden in plain sight everywhere.
Pretty much. Salespeople are often actors. Their priority is persuasion, not necessarily complete objective truth. We only really notice and react negatively to bad salespeople, the awkward, pushy, obvious ones. The sales grandmasters, like Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer getting his friends to pay him for the privilege of whitewashing the fence, operate invisibly. They make you feel like the decision was entirely your own.
And job titles hide it, too.
Absolutely. Most job titles that actually involve distribution are intentionally misleading. Account executive, business development, investment banker, even politician. As Thiel notes wryly, none of us wants to be reminded when we're being sold. Sales ability, he argues, distinguishes the superstars in almost every field. The deal makers on Wall Street, the rainmakers in law firms, the professors who successfully promote their research agendas. Even the direction of fundamental physics research is influenced by persuasion.
So the idea that a great product will just sell itself is a dangerous myth.
A total delusion, according to Thiel. The best product doesn't always win. Distribution, how you get your product to customers, must be considered essential to the design of your product from the very beginning. A great product without an effective way to sell it is fundamentally a bad business.
That really exposes a critical blind spot in how we usually think about value creation. If sales is so systematically hidden, it makes you wonder, what other essential functions are we maybe overlooking or undervaluing in our quest to build the future?
It forces a more holistic view. You need to understand the entire ecosystem required for success, not just the technical brilliance of the core product.
Okay, so how do you sell a product effectively? Thiel argues that superior sales and distribution can even create a monopoly on their own.
Yes, even without significant product differentiation sometimes. The key metrics are straightforward. Customer lifetime value, CLV. The total profit you expect from a customer over time must be significantly higher than your customer acquisition cost, CAC. What it costs you to get that customer in the first place. And naturally, higher-priced products can justify spending more on sales and distribution.
He maps out a kind of distribution continuum.
Right. Based roughly on the average deal size or price point. At the top end, you have complex sales. Deals worth 7 figures or more, maybe millions or even billions.
Like selling rockets or enterprise software.
Exactly. This requires close personal attention, often from the CEO over months or even years. Think of SpaceX, where Elon Musk personally had to navigate complex politics and build relationships to win those huge NASA contracts replacing the space shuttle. Or Palantir, where CEO Alex Karp reportedly spends 25 days a month meeting with government and corporate clients for deals ranging from $1 million to $100 million. Buyers at that level want to talk to the CEO. Growth here is slow and methodical, building trust and reference customers. Okay, below that. Next is personal sales, for deals maybe in the $10,000 to $100,000 range. Here, the challenge isn't just the CEO selling, but building a scalable process for a dedicated sales team to follow. He uses Box as an example, where an early salesperson built relationships, starting with small groups like the Stanford Sleep Clinic and eventually scaled up to university-wide adoption. Or ZocDoc, charging doctors a few $100s a month they need a substantial sales force, and the efforts of those salespeople actually make the product more valuable by growing the network.
Then there's the dead zone.
Yes, the distribution doldrums. Thiel identifies this tricky spot for products priced maybe around $1,000, think specialized software for small businesses, like convenience stores. For these products, broad advertising is usually too expensive and inefficient, but personal sales are also too costly to justify the lower price point. It's a hidden bottleneck for many SMB-focused businesses. Getting distribution right here is really tough.
What about lower-priced products?
For low-priced, mass-appeal products that aren't inherently viral, you rely on marketing and advertising. Think laundry detergent for Procter & Gamble, or Warby Parker selling eyeglasses around $100 a pair. Warby Parker uses TV ads as a great big megaphone because personal sales would be far too expensive and eyeglasses don't exactly go viral.
But startups struggle to compete here.
Hugely. Startups typically can't match the massive ad budgets of established giants. Thiel mentions PayPal's early flop using Scotty from Star Trek as a spokesman, compared to Priceline's much later success with William Shatner. Priceline was already a major player by then and could afford that scale.
And the final method, the holy grail for startups.
Viral marketing. This is where the product's own functionality encourages users to invite their friends, leading potentially to exponential growth. Think Facebook or Dropbox referrals. The key is that each new user should ideally bring in more than one additional user, a viral coefficient greater than 1. The best viral loops are fast and frictionless, like sharing a YouTube video.
And PayPal used this virally, but by paying people.
Right. Their pay-to-grow strategy, $10 to sign up, $10 for referrals, cost them $20 per customer initially, but it drove incredible 7% daily growth, doubling their user base every 10 days. Crucially, they focused this viral engine very specifically on the most valuable users first, the eBay power sellers. By dominating that niche virally, they built a strong foundation.
And the power law applies to distribution, too.
Absolutely. Thiel's key insight here is the power law of distribution. For any given business, it's highly likely that one specific distribution channel will be dramatically more effective, more powerful than all the others combined.
So you shouldn't try a little bit of everything.
No, the kitchen sink approach, doing a bit of advertising, a bit of content marketing, a few salespeople, rarely works. You need to find the one channel that works best for your specific product and market, and then focus relentlessly on optimizing that channel. He argues that poor sales, not a bad product, is the most common reason startups fail. If you can get just one distribution channel working exceptionally well, you likely have a great business. If you try for several but don't truly master any of them, you're probably finished.
And you're not just selling the product.
Exactly. You also have to sell your company to non-customers. You have to sell potential employees on joining your mission. The idea that top talent will just clamor to join is a fantasy. It requires calculated recruiting and persuasion.
And investors.
You absolutely have to sell to investors. The notion that they'll just be banging down the door is another lie. You always need to pitch your vision effectively. And you have to sell to the media. Getting positive press is essential for attracting both investors and employees, because prospective hires will Google you.
So everybody sells.
That's his conclusion. If you look around your company and don't see anyone obviously dedicated to sales, guess what? You are the salesperson. This applies to everyone, founders, early employees, even investors selling their portfolio companies. Selling is unavoidable.
While many traditional industries seem to be stagnating, information technology has just exploded. Smartphones today have vastly more processing power than the computers that guided the Apollo missions. Moore's law just keeps going.
It's incredible. And computers are now outperforming humans in tasks that seemed uniquely human not long ago. Deep Blue beating Kasparov in chess, IBM's Watson winning Jeopardy, Google's self-driving cars.
Which naturally leads to widespread anxiety, right? This fear of job replacement. You hear phrases like, software is eating the world, or articles asking, will a machine replace you?
It's a pervasive fear. But Thiel argues this entire premise of replacement is fundamentally wrong. He believes computers are primarily complements for humans, not substitutes, and the most valuable businesses in the coming decades won't be the ones that make people obsolete, but the ones that empower people to do more.
That really raises the question, are we falling into a kind of trap here? Either a modern Luddite fear trying to stop technology, or maybe a blindly futurist one, assuming replacement is inevitable. What if the real opportunity is totally different based on synergy?
That's exactly Thiel's point. He draws this sharp contrast between globalization, which he sees as substitution, and technology, which he sees as complementarity.
How does globalization mean substitution?
Because in a globalized world, humans increasingly compete directly with other humans for the same jobs and resources. Think of cheaper labor in Mexico affecting U.S. wages, or increased demand from China raising gasoline prices for everyone. The global supply of workers capable of doing repetitive tasks is vast, creating intense competitive pressure through substitution.
But technology is different.
Fundamentally different, he argues. Technology means complementarity because humans and machines are good at profoundly different things.
What are those differences?
People excel at intentionality, making complex plans, exercising nuanced judgment, understanding context. We struggle, however, with processing enormous data sets quickly and accurately. Computers, conversely, are brilliant at efficient data processing and pattern recognition within massive data sets. But they still struggle immensely with basic human judgments, common sense, and true understanding. Remember the cat example.
Right, the supercomputer needing 10 million images versus a toddler.
Exactly. It highlights the fundamental difference. Computers are ultimately tools, not rivals. They don't compete with us for resources. They don't desire luxury goods. Technology, properly harnessed, is the one way Thiel sees to escape the zero-sum competition of a purely globalized world. As computers become more powerful, they will empower us as complement, enabling us to do things we couldn't do before, not simply replace us.
This isn't just a theory. He gives concrete examples of complementary businesses, like PayPal's fraud detection.
A perfect example. In mid-2000, PayPal was losing over $10 million a month to sophisticated credit card fraud. Their initial attempts to build fully automated detection systems failed because the fraudsters were smart and adapted quickly.
So they combine humans and machines.
Yes, they built a hybrid system nicknamed Igor. The software flagged potentially suspicious transactions based on patterns, but trained human operators made the final judgment calls, using intuition and experience that the software lacked. This man-machine symbiosis was incredibly effective. It turned a massive quarterly loss into a profit, and the system was so good the FBI even wanted to use it.
And this led directly to Palantir.
It did. Palantir, founded in 2004 by Thiel and Alex Karp, among others, essentially took this human-computer hybrid intelligence approach and applied it to massive government and enterprise data sets, identifying terrorist networks, uncovering financial fraud. Palantir's approach transcends the biases of purely human-focused intelligence, like the CIA might traditionally do, and purely computer-focused signals intelligence, like the NSA. The software surfaces patterns, anomalies, connections across vast data, but trained human analysts are essential for interpreting that data, understanding context, and making critical decisions.
And it's used in many fields now.
All sorts, predicting IED locations in conflict zones, prosecuting complex insider trading cases, taking down child pornography rings, tracking foodborne disease outbreaks, detecting insurance fraud. In every case, the human element, the analyst, the prosecutor, the scientist, the investigator, remains absolutely crucial, but they're empowered by the technology to be far more effective.
So better tech doesn't replace professionals.
It empowers them. Better technology in law, medicine, education won't replace lawyers, doctors, or teachers. It will enable them to do more, handle more complex cases, diagnose more accurately, tailor instruction more effectively. Think about LinkedIn for recruiters.
It didn't get rid of recruiters.
Not at all. It transformed their jobs. Almost all recruiters now use LinkedIn's powerful search and filtering tools. It complements their human expertise in identifying, assessing, and persuading candidates. It makes them better at their jobs.
Yet, Thiel points out a bias in computer science towards substitution.
He does. He suggests that software engineers are often trained with the mindset of automating away human effort, replacing it entirely. Academic research in areas like machine learning or big data often focuses implicitly or explicitly on breaking down complex human capabilities into specialized tasks that computers can then conquer and take over.
Like machine learning.
The term itself, machine learning, kind of evokes replacement. Things like Netflix recommendations or Google Translate are amazing feats of pattern extraction from vast data, but they don't truly understand language or taste in the human sense.
And big data.
Companies have this insatiable appetite for data, sometimes mistakenly believing that just having more data automatically creates more value. But Thiel cautions that big data is usually dumb data. Computers are great at finding correlations, even spurious ones, in massive data sets. It still takes human analysts to interpret those patterns, understand causality, and provide genuinely actionable insights. True, generalized AI that can replicate human understanding is still firmly in the realm of science fiction. We tend to exoticize technology, he says. We get overly impressed by relatively small feats accomplished solely by computers, while often ignoring the much larger, more impactful achievements made possible by human-computer complementarity, precisely because the human contribution makes them seem less magical or uncanny.
So what about the future? Those fears of strong AI, computers becoming way smarter than humans, friend or foe?
Thiel sees strong AI, true artificial general intelligence, eclipsing human capabilities as a potential concern, but likely for the 22nd century or beyond. He calls it a cosmic lottery ticket. It could lead to utopia, or it could lead to a Skynet-like disaster. But indefinite fears about that distant, uncertain future shouldn't paralyze us or stop us from making definite plans today. His core message is optimistic in a definite way. There is tremendous room right now for sane, thoughtful people to build a vastly better world by finding new ways for computers to help humans do what was previously unimaginable, rather than just focusing on replacing them. It's about harnessing technology for complementarity and empowerment.
Okay, let's ground all these ideas in a really concrete, powerful case study. Think back to the early 21st century. There was this overwhelming consensus, right? Clean technology was definitely the next big thing.
Absolute universal agreement. You had pressing environmental concerns everywhere, smog in Beijing, arsenic in Bangladesh water, worsening hurricanes, Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth winning an Oscar. The momentum seemed unstoppable.
And the money poured in.
Huge amounts.
Yeah.
Over $50 billion invested into literally thousands of clean tech companies worldwide. Everyone wanted a piece of the green revolution.
But the result wasn't a healthier planet, was it?
Not really. It was mostly a massive clean tech bubble, followed by a painful bust. Solyndra became the infamous poster child, but they weren't alone. Over 40 other solar manufacturers went bankrupt in 2012 alone. It was a dramatic, widespread failure. This is a perfect example of how widespread agreement on a macro need doesn't automatically translate into successful individual business ventures.
Yeah.
It really makes you ask, why do so many smart people get caught up in these collective delusions?
So why did most clean tech companies fail? Thiel argues it comes back to those 7 key questions every business must answer. If you get 0 good answers, you're just hoping for a miracle.
Exactly. Let's look at CleanTech's scorecard against those 7 questions. 1. The engineering question. Did they have breakthrough technology? Rarely. Most clean tech offered incremental improvements, maybe 2x better at best, certainly not the 10x improvement the Thiel sees as necessary. Solyndra's fancy cylindrical solar cells were actually less efficient per area than standard flat ones. Small improvements just don't overcome real-world costs, installation hassles, and consumer skepticism. You need a decisive technological leap.
2. The timing question. Was it the right time? Entrepreneurs often drew false analogies, comparing solar in the mid-2000s to microprocessors in the late 70s, expecting imminent exponential growth.
But the reality was different. Standard silicon solar cells invented way back in 1954 at Bell Labs had seen only slow, linear improvement for decades. There were no major engineering breakthroughs around 2005 suggesting some impending liftoff. The timing assumption was flawed.
3. The monopoly question. Were they targeting a big share of a small, specific market first? Mostly, no. Investors like John Doerr were talking about trillions in the overall energy market. But huge markets mean huge, ruthless competition.
Clean tech executives often exaggerated their uniqueness while competing in crowded spaces. Misolet, just one of many thin-film solar companies, predicted global dominance. But thin film itself was just one category among dozens of solar technologies. They were stuck in vicious competition and eventually acquired for pennies on the dollar. They got market sizing completely confused, rhetorically shrinking their niche to sound unique, but then asking for valuations based on the massive global energy market.
The people question. Did they have the right team? Energy is fundamentally an engineering challenge. Yet, Thiel argues many failed clean tech companies were run by shockingly non-technical teams, often salesman executives who were great at raising capital and lobbying for government subsidies, but not so good at actually building complex, reliable products. This is where the suit comment comes in.
Yes. Thiel mentions it as a personal red flag observed at Founders Fund. Clean tech executives often wore suits and ties. He contrasted this with his view of real technologists, who typically wear t-shirts and jeans. His blunt advice: never invest in a tech CEO that wears a suit. It's a generalization, sure, but it captures his bias towards founders who are deeply immersed in the technology itself.
Okay, number 5, distribution.
The distribution question. Could they actually deliver the product effectively? Clean tech companies often spend far more time courting government officials and investors than understanding and reaching actual customers. Selling and delivering the product is just as critical as the product itself.
Like the Better Place example.
A classic case. An Israeli electric vehicle infrastructure startup raised and spent a staggering $800 million. How many cars do they actually enable? Only about 1,000 before going bankrupt. The customer experience was incredibly complex, unclear product value, needing specific approvals, limited routes, complex fueling subscriptions, relying on a whole new battery-swapping infrastructure and behavior. They utterly failed to market and distribute clearly, seemingly believing their superior technology would just sell itself. It didn't.
This durability question. Would their business be defensible for 10 or 20 years? Few clean tech companies had convincing answers. They often blamed fierce competition from China later on, but they failed to ask up front, what will stop China or anyone else from copying us and wiping out our business?
They also showed a remarkable lack of foresight about the broader energy market dynamics. They were completely blindsided by the rapid rise of fracking in the U.S., which caused natural gas prices to plummet by 70% between 2000 and 2013. Shale gas went from under 2% to over 34% of U.S. production in that time. This absolutely devastated the economic models for many renewable energy companies that had assumed high fossil fuel prices would continue indefinitely.
And finally, number 7, the secret question.
7. The secret question. Did they identify a unique opportunity that others didn't see? Mostly, no. Clean tech companies typically justify themselves using conventional truths. The world needs cleaner energy. Climate change is real. They assumed that an overwhelming social need automatically implied an overwhelming business opportunity. But relying on widely accepted conventional wisdom is the opposite of having a secret. The very fact that everyone agrees solar was the future, from President Bush to VC John Doerr, should have been a warning sign. That consensus led scores of companies pursuing the same obvious idea straight into bankruptcy. Great companies are built on secret-specific, non-obvious insights about technology or markets that give them a unique edge.
This really challenges that whole idea of social entrepreneurship, doesn't it? Doing well by doing good.
It does. Clean tech was perhaps the biggest flop in that category. Companies aiming to do well by doing good often achieve neither. Thiel points out the ambiguity. Does socially good mean actually good for society, or just seen as good by society? The latter often leads to building conventional, undifferentiated products that cater to popular sentiment, rather than solving a unique problem in a superior way. True progress, he argues, comes from doing something different, solving a unique problem that is both genuinely beneficial and allows you to monopolize a new market. It's not enough just to have good intentions.
But amidst all this failure, Tesla stands out. Thiel argues they got all 7 questions right.
Exactly. Tesla succeeded, where so many others failed because they had compelling answers across the board. 1. Technology. Tesla's tech was breakthrough. Their integrated design, battery technology, software, the Model S received top ratings, Car of the Year awards. It was genuinely 10x better in many ways, so much so that other car companies licensed or relied on Tesla's tech. 2. Timing. Elon Musk saw a critical, one-time-only window in 2010 to secure a $465 million Department of Energy loan. He got it just before those government subsidies became highly politicized and dried up. Perfect timing. 3. Monopoly. Tesla didn't try to take on the entire car market at once. They started with a tiny specific niche, high-end electric sports cars. The original Roadster, 109K, they dominated that. Built credibility, then moved to dominate the luxury electric sedan market with the Model S small market first, then expand. Textbook. 4. Team. Musk himself, as Thiel describes him, the consummate engineer and salesman, assembled an exceptional team, a special forces unit deeply committed to the ambitious mission and capable of executing. 5. Distribution. Unlike other car companies relying on franchise dealers, Tesla built and owned its entire distribution chain, its stores for sales and service centers. This gives them complete control over the customer experience, strengthens the brand, and ultimately saves money long-term by cutting out the middleman. 6. Durability. Tesla built a significant head start in technology and brand. They continue to innovate faster than most legacy automakers. Their brand is incredibly strong and coveted. And crucially, the visionary founder, Musk, remains firmly in charge, driving the long-term strategy. 7. Secrets. This is fascinating. Thiel argues Tesla understood a key secret, that much of the initial interest in clean tech was driven by fashion and social signaling, not just pure environmental concern. So Tesla focused on building cars that made drivers look cool and feel good, period, not just eco-conscious.
Yeah.
Think Leonardo DiCaprio ditching his Prius for a Roadster. The secret was recognizing that clean tech was largely a social phenomenon, and catering to that desire for status and performance was key.
So Tesla's success proves it wasn't clean tech itself that was flawed, but the approach most companies took.
Exactly. The world does need new energy solutions. But the clean tech bubble, like the dot-com bubble before it, involved a compelling big idea, but far too many companies chasing the same obvious version of that idea with flawed strategies.
So what's the path forward for Energy 2.0?
Thiel suggests entrepreneurs need to learn the lessons and start at the microscale. Find small, specific niches where new energy solutions offer a 10x improvement now. Maybe replacing expensive diesel generators on remote islands, or developing small modular nuclear reactors for specific industrial or military uses where cost isn't the only factor. The challenge, paradoxically, is to think small initially in order to build the foundation for truly large-scale, impactful change later on. #outro.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, journeying through Peter Thiel's provocative ideas in 0 to 1. We've explored that fundamental difference between just copying things going from 1 to n and truly creating something new going from 0 to 1.
We've dug into the counterintuitive advantages of monopolies, why competition might actually be destructive, and the absolute necessity of having a definite, optimistic vision for the future, rather than just drifting indefinitely.
We looked at the inescapable truth of the power law, how outcomes are often radically unequal, and the critical role of finding and leveraging hidden secrets that others overlook.
And we saw how getting the foundations right from the very beginning, mastering strategic distribution, and harnessing the power of human-machine complementarity aren't just abstract concepts. They are the core DNA of successful, lasting ventures.
Ultimately, this deep dive is really an invitation to you, our listener, an invitation to challenge conventional wisdom, maybe rethink what you truly value, and perhaps embrace the courage it takes to build something genuinely new and valuable in the world.
It really is about looking beyond the surface, questioning what everyone else accepts, and daring to define your own unique path forward, that path from 0 to 1.
So, as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over. If you look around and you're not seeing any secrets, any hidden opportunities, perhaps you're just not looking hard enough or in the right places, what assumption, what convention are you going to stop accepting as just the way things are and start actively questioning today to find your own unique path from 0 to 1?
Something to definitely think about.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.
Distributors can benefit from the quick cash factoring can provide. Contact Chris Lehnes at Versant Funding to learn if your client is a factoring fit.